Welcome to the Inspire Every Life podcast. My name is Sion Berhane Gabra Mikiel, and I am your host. You have joined us on a tremendous episode. This is an episode where we are featuring resilient women, and I have with me today, ladies and gentlemen, Tamika Newson. She is a lawyer who has been practicing in both private and professional sectors for over 45 years. Professionally, her work is challenging by nature, and she has navigated through many waters in life as an African American woman who is a wife, a mother, a sister, a friend to many. And she has dealt with great challenges, and she's prepared to share some of those nuggets, those wisdom nuggets that we're going to need for our own journey. She has lived through both highs and lows, professionally and personally. She has been married and divorced. She was a single mother for 10 years. Then she, by God's grace, got remarried to an amazing husband. They're still married till this day, and has a blended family of a total of 6 children. She suffered the loss of her oldest son to death by suicide. And through all of the many challenges, what I admire about this woman is that she considers herself tremendously blessed and highly favored. Welcome to the broadcast, Tamika Newson.
Thank you so much, Sion. I really appreciate you having me. I appreciate you doing this. I think what you're doing is God's work, and it's going to be such a blessing to everyone who has the opportunity to listen and participate. I'm excited to be here.
That is so wonderful. Tamika, please tell us a little bit about your journey through marriage, your former marriage and now your encore marriage. So tell us a little bit about that journey and how it was for you navigating through life as a single mother, and what you think was most impactful. What are some of the life lessons that you could share with our listeners?
Absolutely. I think for me, and you'll probably hear this theme recurring as we talk about different things, I kind of had a path for my life. I had something that I just expected was supposed to be. It wasn't God's path for my life, but it was mine. And I learned a lot of life lessons. And so through marriage was one of those. It was like I had gone to college. I was in law school. I was dating this guy. We are supposed to be getting married. This is the time. This is how my life is supposed to work. It's this checklist of things. So I married a man I wasn't supposed to marry. There's just really no other explanation than that. Not a terrible person. We ended up having 3 beautiful children out of it. But at some point, you kind of, God taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, what are we doing here? You're unhappy. You're going to create an unhappy house. You're going to create some unhappy children. So this is not blessed. We got to do something different. And it's almost like when you know you can't unknow, right? It's like, okay, I did it my way. That wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. But now I've got to leave this situation, and I'm leaving as a partner in a law firm, which required a lot.
Yes.
With 3 kids under the age of, I think my youngest was 2, and I had a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So it was one of those things where I had to just kind of say, this is a turning point in my life where I've got to figure out what path to take. I knew what I needed to do. I felt like God would bless me in that, and he absolutely did. So I left that marriage, and for 10 years was a single mom, 3 boys, working all the time. And I thank God for my mother, because she was the extra support that I needed. My kids never went to daycare. They went to grandma's house.
Wow.
So God structured all of that for me to be able to be and do what I needed to be and do through that time. I never thought I'd marry again. I was like, I've been there, done that, messed that up, but what I've learned through that process is sometimes things are stumbling blocks. Things are just things you've got to get through. That was a challenge that you got through. You learned something from, you moved on, and then without any effort, I should say, I meet this man that I'm like, oh, he's cool. We'll be good friends. And he's like, no, ma'am, you are meant to be my wife. And so we now have this wonderful marriage, and
Wow.
three, beautiful girls into the relationship. So we ended up being this Black Brady Bunch. And mind you, it is not Brady Bunch. We still we got plenty challenges and situations that we navigate through every day, but it's love, and it is what I feel like God intended for me all along. But I had
Mm-hmm.
to get there the way I got there because I was
Mm-hmm.
doing things my way instead of his way. And so that was something that I've learned a lot personally and professionally.
Right.
He'll let you do what you do, and he'll let you stumble and fall, but he will always give you the tools you need to pick yourself back up and get on his track. So, yeah.
Mm. That's powerful. What I'm hearing you say is that oftentimes we might have this trajectory in our mind, a timetable in our mind, where we want certain things to happen for us at a specific time, and we choose to go on our path. However, God didn't leave you when you chose your own way. He was with you every step of the way. And I thank God for your aha moment, for that moment that you came to yourself. It's just like that prodigal son, right? We all know about that prodigal son. He went and did things his way. He thought he was doing the right thing. And then after some time of being in the valley of Baca, the valley of tears, because that's what God will bring you to in order to bring you through. And that's what I'm hearing. And that takes resilience, and that takes being faithful to God and and giving God a fresh yes. So there was a lot of risk involved in stepping out of a comfortable but uncomfortable marriage, right? You had your children were all under the age of 7. They were school age kids. And then you were able to overcome that through a heart of resilience. What were some of the key factors in you overcoming and being victorious? Because oftentimes when we hear divorce, we take it as a failure, but sometimes it's not a failure, it's an opportunity. And that's what I'm hearing from your story, is that it was an opportunity for you to develop into who God was calling you to be. So what were some of those things that you could kind of share with us in terms of how you were able to reframe your experience in your mind?
So I think some of the circumstances that happened, that were outside of my control,
Mm-hmm.
that promoted me, that advanced my life, that
Mm.
advanced my children. It was like I was getting signs from God that you're doing what I need you to do. That was a big part of it. I mean, and I can give you an example. When I left my husband, I didn't have anything. I left everything. But you know what? We got a house. I to this day have no idea how we qualified to buy a house when I was mid-divorce with nothing.
Wow.
We got a house. My kids were all doing well in school, adjusting well. My mom was there. My mom lived, thousands of miles away, and just happened to be able to move to be with us for that
Wow.
time. It was like things were just falling into place. So I kind of sat back and looked at it and was like, this this is the setup. Like this, God is showing me that even if you don't see how
Mhm.
a way is going to be made, I'm letting you see how these almost supernatural things are happening in your life. And so when you see that, it gives you the confidence to step
Mm.
out on that. So I was like, okay, Lord, I see you. You're supporting me. I feel like I now have the confidence to step into this new life, this new reality. So I don't know that it was as much of the resilience that I had in me, or that grew from stepping into what I felt like God was telling me to do. Every step I took, I got more courage, I got more confidence,
Mhm.
and I started seeing more results.
Mhm.
So I think courage and confidence and faith were probably the themes that I would say kind of got me through that period of life. And I felt like I could see I could see down the road how we were all going to be better off even my ex-husband, you
Wow.
know, that we're all going to be better off by the steps that I'm taking now, and God is rectifying some of the wrongs that I created
Mm,
so that we can be better.
I love it. And when you stepped out in faith, God met you. Because I remember you when you shared your story originally with me, you said, I pretty much left the marriage with nothing.
I did.
Like no financial help,
I left
nothing.
everything because I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to fight. And it was already a fight. I mean, it
Yeah.
was not a joyful separation. We were not on good terms.
Mhm.
Things about the kids, things about finances. And I said, you know what? You can have it. Take it. Because what's meant for me will be mine, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, he took all of that, and I said, I will start over. I didn't have a spoon, I didn't have a fork, but we made a way, and everything happened as it should have. Like, without it wasn't hard.
Mhm.
I just put things in place for me and people in place for me. That's why
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
be a friend, because you never know who is going to be there for you and who
Yes.
you might need down the road. There were people that I hadn't thought about in my life, just random acquaintances that stepped up and made things happen,
Wow.
which changed me, right? So now I
Mhm.
know I need to be that person in life. So it's made me a better friend, made me a better colleague, so all of those things, I think you have to accept them as things that really impact the way you move in the world. And so
Mhm.
I feel like through all of these challenges, I've had situations and circumstances and people and places and things that have made me who I am today, and a better person for everyone I interact with going forward. So,
Wow. Wow. And how did that impact your faith in God? Because you are a strong woman.
mhm.
Um, I think just in your constitution, and I know that the challenges that you've had along the way has lent to that. But how has your faith sort of helped you to navigate those highs and lows of life?
I think you only get through the lows through faith. I mean,
Hmm.
because when you have nothing and no one else to turn to, because I think we all have our own ego and our
Right.
own sense of I
Hmm.
know how to do, I know what to do. But when God shows you that wasn't it, and you
Hmm.
have nothing else to rely on, if you don't have faith, I don't know what you turn to. So in the lowest of times, I think faith is what kind of stood me up. Like, I know that I'm not alone. I know that there is a path out of this. I know that there's a reason for this.
Hmm.
And then in the highs, I look at faith as just it's my ability to just rejoice in coming out of the lows and
Hmm.
celebrating the highs, and in knowing that you provided this for me. This is what I'm really supposed to be living in. So
Wow.
it's there throughout. But I think I'd be lying if I said that there weren't times when I was like, Lord, why you put me here? Why have I got to go through this? I've been doing most of what I'm supposed to do. I think we all have that too. Like, why me? But why
Yeah.
not? Why
Hmm.
not?
Why not me? Yeah, because sometimes I think we ask God the wrong questions because we want to get out of that situation. But what I'm hearing in your story is that you were tried by fire,
Hmm.
and that the fire was not able to burn you, but accelerate your growth and your development. And as God can continue to trust you with more. So here's the thing, if we don't ever step out in faith, we don't know what God can do. So as you were able to muster up your own strength to step out in faith, God met you, and he began to show you who he is. I mean, when I as you were sharing, I was just visualizing him being your Jehovah Jireh, your provider, and then him being your comforter, and him leading, guiding, and directing. You were already a very successful woman. And it's interesting because you had so much success professionally, but personally you were struggling. How does your personal struggle impact your professional ability to rise? Because you were still able to get to heights that most people can't get to till this day without all of that drama and trauma. So how were you able to do that?
It's interesting. I think, it's true what they say, God never gives you more than you can bear. I've always been a strive. I've always been a type A person who has done really well academically, really well professionally. And so God he let me do that. He let me flourish in that. But then personally, it was like, this ain't necessarily your strong suit. So he let me have a little bit of failure in that. And they were all kind of coming together at the same time. So to your point, like I went straight through undergrad, law school. I had a prestigious internship with, Minnesota Supreme Court. And then I started at a law firm, private firm, first Black woman to be there. And first Black woman to make partner at that firm. I made partner at that firm having 3 babies in 6 years. And that was not all me, mind you. I had a lot of great people again in my path and a lot of hard work. But at the same time, professionally, I'm shining. I'm in, newspaper articles about being the first, of this, that, and the other, making, way more money than I thought I'd ever make. And at home, it's falling apart, right? Mm-hmm. So, you have to reconcile those things too, because I've had the flip side of that situation where my home life is fantastic and work is in shambles.
Wow.
But thankfully, I've never had both at the same time. I remember that because I do hear people who are going through that, and I'm like, that would be probably soul crushing, because on some level you're like, hey, at least I've got something that I'm doing right? But I think through all of that, we're all just life lessons. Like, I've watched my family, who had none of them were professionals. They were all just hardworking people. And, my dad's a veteran, and, just, people who I saw just work hard their whole life, but still never really got to where they wanted to get to.
Wow.
So in many ways, professionally, I was living that dream, not just for me, but for my family and for, my kids. And, I felt like that was probably more of and this will sound terrible maybe, but it's true. It may have been more of a higher calling for me to succeed professionally than personally. For many years, I functioned that way because I knew I was standing on the shoulders of so many people who didn't have the academic opportunities I had, who weren't able to be successful professionally. None of my family were lawyers and doctors. We didn't have anybody in my family that was doing that. I was the first.
Wow.
It was very important for me to be that for a lot of people, places, and things. And family, I thought, I always saw family just making it, doing what it do. I didn't think that it required as much as it really did. So life told me differently down the road that I focus on that part too, and that part's important, and that part's fulfilling.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot. I think we all are managing a lot of expectations, a lot of history, and so and none of it just starts with you. You think for me, I'm like, what did I bring into this life that was out of my control, that impacted my decisions and impacted my path? And there are a lot of the professional things, I think, and personal too. I can't leave that out because, we all come with that baggage both ways. I had to grow into who I was in both areas. And if it weren't for faith and being willing to bump my head and say, that's okay, I'm gonna do better next time. And that's again, professionally and personally. The personal stuff is harder because the head bumps impact people in ways that sometimes you can't correct. And that's more challenging, I think.
Wow. I appreciate everything that you shared, and that resonated as truth to my heart. This is the Resilient Woman series. That's a key theme here. What does it mean to be resilient to you personally? And what does it mean to be resilient to you professionally? Because I see that as a theme and a thread in your life, but I want to know what it means to you.
Yeah, so I think being resilient personally means to always work to be my best self for my family and my friends. And that means that I know I'm not going to get everything right. I know I'm not going to say everything right. I'm not going to be the best example. But when I'm not, to own it and how can I change this? How can I be better? I think, somebody, I don't know who said this a long time ago, anything that's not growing is dead. I'm not dead. I still got growth in me. And I see that like with every stage of my kids' lives and my impact on how they move. And, I'm like, I want to be a blessing to them so that they can be a blessing to their kids and the next generation. So, so personally, I think just owning who you are, how you show up, and being better for the people that are around you, and being that rock that they can lean on. But that means that there's no failure, and that theme I think goes personally and professionally. There's no failure, there's just growth. So anytime I'm not where I need to be, I'm like, okay, that wasn't exactly where I needed to be, but I know better and I will do better. And it's the same professionally. It's kind of hard for someone like me, because if you can't tell, I'm pretty transparent. Like,
you are.
What you see is what you get. I'm not ashamed of any of my life, my situations, my story. I think it all is a beautiful nightmare in some ways, and a beautiful happy ending in others. But in the professional setting, it's harder because I'm still transparent and I'm trusting, and I had to learn how to kind of guard myself enough to still present as who I am, but to not give it all away, and to not allow people to pull me down with their stuff, because I'm like, at home, yeah, I'm here for you. I want you to take what I've got. At work, I want to take what they got. I mean, at work is a means to an end. It is a lot of time there, and we do have wonderful relationships that we take from workplaces. But when work starts to suck your soul, I had to figure out how to step back from that and still be successful in it without taking it in as a personal failure, because I got my own stuff. I can't take other people's imperfections and allow that to impact how I show up and who I am at work. So that was a little bit harder, because I think as I moved up the scale, there were I just encountered different things, and I trusted the wrong people, and and so I had to pivot a lot in work as well. Some pivots from really high earning professional gigs to I'm taking a third of what I was making before, because I can't do that anymore. And so I've made some tough choices professionally as well, that a lot of people probably would say look like failure, but it was really just a setup. It was God saying, that's not for you anymore. I got something else for you. And it's going to be better if you let me help you get there. And so faith at work is hard.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you saying is you will not compromise on your integrity. And in the field of law, right, it is one in which there's a lot of that. There are people that are willing to compromise, and I think in other fields as well, but we'll stay on this trajectory of in law firms, be it corporations, right? So you've done both in private and corporate, but you were uncompromisingly like integral. And when you are an African American woman leading in global litigation, It is a whole other stratosphere. You are in another realm, if you will. And it's rare air up there, because not only are you probably the only, but you're probably the only woman, and you're litigating very complex waters. And I have such a tremendous respect for you, because I know showing up as who you are authentically is very difficult. And I watched you do it. I didn't have an opportunity to work directly with you, but I have been in spaces and places where your voice was a light. And I remember calling you one day when I was going through a situation myself professionally. And I wasn't really seeking legal advice, but you gave me that as well, because that's just the way you think. But you were very strategic, yet a wonderful friend. And I'm like, wow, that's why in all those meetings when I would see you present, or, because we would, ebb and flow in different arenas together, I was like, wow, she is the beacon. She is a strength. She is a light. And that's how I saw you as we were navigating through our own corporate waters. What advice would you give to professional women, African American women, especially during the pandemic? I do believe I was impacted by that, being a leader myself and experiencing some of the issues. And listen, this is not, the leader at SHRM has, Johnny T. Taylor has said that, for Black women in the workspace, there has been so much toxicity. There's just been so many things that they have to navigate. What advice would you give to a woman of color who is going through that right now? How does she keep her head up? How does she stay authentic? How does she be able to continue to bring her whole self to work, but still keep her integrity intact?
I think the best advice I can give is to trust yourself. Trust yourself in what you see, what you hear, what you feel, because there's a lot of people that will try to make you feel like you're not seeing what you're seeing. You're not feeling what's real. Because I think us as Black women, we come as authentic as you can come. And we're gonna most of the time bring our best selves to work. Like we know it requires a lot for us to be in these spaces. We know that we've got to be better than everybody else. We know that we're being scrutinized harsher than everyone else. So, knowing that on the front end, we come in ready to roll. So when you're doing your absolute best, but you know that somebody's nitpicking with you,
yes,
or they are, trying to set you up for failure, sit in that. Acknowledge it for what it is. Don't let people convince you with something else, and then be very strategic about what you're going to do about it. Because I feel like those are some of the biggest challenges we face as Black women now. There's people who are going to try to discredit you. They're going to lie on you. They're going to try to take credit for what you do. And if you shine too much, they're going to try to dim your light.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, take that in some ways as a sign of success, because you got to be doing something to get all this attention. What Beyonce say, you that if you're getting all this attention, there's that. So, but just prepare yourself for what comes with that, and don't think it's you. Don't think it's your failure, because you know what you do. You know what you brought to the table. You know how to be what they're asking you to be. Mm-hmm. But if that's not enough, you got to figure out, is it worth staying in this environment? Is it worth dealing with these people?
Mm-hmm.
And is this what God planned for me? Is this what He really wants for me? Because one thing I found is when things get too hard, it's usually God telling you, I got something else for you if you would just let me get you to it.
That part. And sometimes it's so hard because we as women put our whole selves into our work. Mm-hmm. So we don't just work to collect a paycheck. There's a lot of who we are and our own creativity, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to innovate, we're going to create, we're going to find solutions. They pay us
Yeah.
because we find solutions, we create solutions that probably was never there. And when you're working at that high level, it's almost like you're a target.
Mhm.
Right? We've seen leaders from institutions as high up as Harvard University that were African American women step down, one after the other. Boston U. I mean, we can go on and on. If you're a woman of color, you're probably, and you're in the working world, you're an entrepreneur, not an entrepreneur. You're experiencing on this on some level. So I wanted to speak to that, because one of the things that sometimes we don't do is we just sit there and bear up under it. And there is a mental health crisis right now with women of color that are in toxic work environments and dealing with this and not knowing how to come up. So I even suggest, hey, do what I did. I phoned a friend. I didn't know if Tamika would understand, but because I hadn't known you in that way before. But nothing that I said to you was a surprise. And it just made me feel so much more better, knowing that I could go another day, but knowing that I was not crazy, that what I was feeling was what I was feeling, that it was intentional, it was targeted, and it was toxic. And I had a choice to make whether I was going to stay or go. And that was up to me. What I love about your story is you weren't always chasing the dollar. You were chasing purpose. You were going after purpose. And oftentimes I think that sometimes we feel stuck as women, because it's very difficult navigating through the workplace. You know, even just the interview process for us is very challenging. I mean, we could come with the degrees more than a thermometer and become, we're overqualified for some of these positions that but it's difficult to navigate through that. And I thank you for being that example, because you're right. Your achievement was not just for you and your family. It was for all of us.
Yep.
It was for all of us, because I always tell people, there's always somebody watching you. You don't even know they're watching. You had no idea. I didn't even approach you for a good year and a half before, I decided to step in and say, hey, let me ask her a question. And it had to do with school and higher education. And you were very impactful for me to, choose continuing my own educational journey. So I just wanted to take this moment to say thank you. Thank you. And
Well,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to ask the question, because I think that's another place where we struggle as Black women. We have to be so strong and so, just resilient, the word that we for the day, that sometimes we feel like it's a failure just to ask questions, just to ask for help. And so, I've given up the ghost on that. If I need something and I know somebody's got some answers or some experience, I'm a call. And I love that I'm seeing more of that. I think you mentioned COVID and some of the situations that have happened, with people in the workplace since then. I've gotten so many calls.
Oh, wow.
From sisters, some I knew, some I didn't know. One saw my profile on LinkedIn and just said, you look like you have some experience that I need. Can I talk to you? I think we need to do that more, because you'd be so surprised at the amount of people that are willing to share, willing to help. I made some random friends. I'm just saying, sure, yeah, no, you want to talk to me about mediation? Absolutely. I'm happy to talk to you about that.
Right.
And you'll find some doors closed too, but you learn from that as well, because there have been some people who in my life and path have said a lot and represented themselves to be a lot, and when it came down to actually needing them and reaching out to them, they weren't there. So that tells you something too.
Mm-hmm.
And those are hard.
Mm-hmm.
And hard things to walk away from. But I've had to do that in my professional and personal life as well. I've had to walk away from some people. Mm-hmm. And those are always good lessons too, because again, I always go back to saying God puts in place what you need when you need it, and that's not it. They're not there for you, and it's for a good reason. So let's keep moving, and I don't look at it as a negative for that person. I'm not mad at you. I don't harbor any ill feelings, but I've got to pivot, and our paths may never cross again, but if they do, I now know how to treat you. You
Right.
know what kind of access to give to you.
I love that. George Frazier often says, and really coined this phrase, that the 5 people, I know who you are by the 5 people that are closest to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I could prophesy your future based upon those that are in your inner circle. I know Jesus had the 3, then he had the 12, then he had the 120, then he had the 700. So what you're saying is so profound, because if we allow ourselves to stay in toxic relationships, both personally or professionally, organizationally, we are doing a disservice to the gift that God has placed on the inside of us. Sometimes you got to know when to hold them.
Yep.
And sometimes you got to know when to let go. And you've been able to navigate through that. How important has it been for you on your journey, especially professionally? I want to continue to talk a little bit more about that. When you've had to let go of something that was so near and dear to your heart because of the amount of work that you've put in, or when you've had to let go of professional relationship, how have you navigated through those waters?
I think there's a certain amount of grief that you have. I think professionally and personally, and so recognizing the grieving piece was big for me, because I was like, I just feel like I'm in a funk, and I don't know what's going on. I don't feel right. I don't trust myself. I'm not confident in my work. Why am I feeling this way? And then when you kind of peel back the layers, you're like, I feel like I lost something by walking away from this professional, story that I was building in this life. And, one example I can give you is, when I left private practice to go in-house and become a corporate lawyer, I used to laugh at corporate lawyers. No lie. I would say, if you went into corporate law, it was probably because you couldn't succeed in private practice, and so for me to have had that perspective and then become one of those people, I was like, okay, I don't know why, but I knew why I was doing it. And everything that was happening in my professional life and private practice was going downhill.
Wow.
I'm losing at trial. I lost a client, a big client. I'm at a firm that's falling apart. I'm like, and then the people that I thought were mentors and friends are doing things that are negatively impacting my professional career. Like, nothing was going right toward the end of my life as a law firm lawyer. And so I'm like, I need to pivot. I need to do something different. So I'm gonna try this. So I knew why I was doing it, but just allowing myself to sit in this. Okay, I'm not a bad lawyer. I'm not going here because I'm a bad lawyer. I can't do that. It was time, and there's a reason. And I'm gonna go through this. I'm about to walk this path. I'm gonna walk it with my head held high, and I'm gonna do my absolute best. And I'm gonna make this what I need it to be. And I keep saying I, but underneath that I, it's got to be some guidance from God. Like, okay, Lord, tell me, make sure if this is where I'm supposed to be, help me do this. Help me be where I'm supposed to be and be right in it. And so once you get through the grief of this is not what I thought it was going to be, and that was 22 years into my practice.
Wow.
Like, I'm starting over in a sense. Who am I in this new world? So I think there's a lot of places and pivots in our life. Even in the corporate world, I've had to pivot a couple of times, and I've had some really toxic professional situations that I had to navigate that I never thought I would have to deal with.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, Lord, it's like, get me to where I'm supposed to be. I feel like I'm in a very, very good place now. But I'm it's still a path. It's still, I'm still, walking that race, and hopefully we'll get to where ultimately professionally I'm supposed to be. But in that has been highs, lows, in terms of title, in terms of pay, in terms of relationships, in terms of public status. And within all of that, all I can say is I've been my authentic self the entire time, and I'm proud of what I've done, and I'm proud of where I am.
That's awesome. I love that. And what I'm hearing in that is that we as professional women that give to the degree and show up as our true selves in these environments, and when we're facing levels of toxicity, we need to be aware of it, address it, and know that you're not the problem. It might be the environment. And if it is, how do you navigate it to the point where the confusion stays on the outside of you, but doesn't impact your self-esteem, your confidence? And here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, that I can share, having gone through something like that. It does impact you. Because you live in this body, you're a spiritual being, you have a mind, you have a soul, your heart is to do the best that you can. And yet there's microaggressions, and yet there's all of these things that could be happening to you. But if you would just pray, as my sister just so eloquently said, God will give you a pathway to navigate in, through, and maybe even up and out of it. Every situation is going to look different. But I love the fact that you gave the guidance of grieve the loss. Sit with the loss. We know that grief and loss is not something that is always talked about in society, but in the realm of resilience, we have to know how to go through the losses of life. And for most of us, we spend a lot of time at work, working with our colleagues, working with leaders, working, no matter what space you're in. Tamika's in the legal space, and that in and of itself, like she said earlier, has all of these challenges. Yet one thing remains the same, that people are people and people are flawed. If there was one piece of advice, Tamika, you could give to someone who's currently facing insurmountable odds, either professionally or personally, how would you advise them in terms of how to tap into their inner resilience?
Oh, wow. This is such a nuanced thing for everybody, because everybody has a different thing they need. And I think just recognizing that, because I don't think there's any one path into a person's resilience. Some people need to withdraw. Some people need to be involved. Some people need to sit in a grieving kind of a space for a minute. Some people need to jump into something new. So I think really accepting whatever it is that you inherently know you need, and to do it without apology or explanation, that's a hard thing sometimes. But it also requires you to be quiet, and to just to listen to yourself, to hear God's voice, to determine what it is you need. And I'll give a personal example, because I'm probably not explaining it very well. But when I lost my son, that was the biggest loss I pray I ever will go through in life, right? And I didn't know how to move through that. My grief told me I need separation and space. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to share any information. It wasn't on social media. I wasn't taking calls. I was just, for a long time, just kind of with myself. And I know a lot of people worry about that, because they're like, is she depressed? Is she okay? What's going on? But it was my way of taking my time to really process what this meant for my life, what this meant for me, for my faith. And once I was able to reconcile it internally for myself, then I could come to the world. Now I can talk about it. Now I can, prayerfully be a blessing to somebody else who's having to deal with and go through the same thing. But I couldn't have done that unless I had dealt with that grief myself, personally. And that's not the same journey for everybody. Some of my friends are like, she's not taking my calls. My husband's like, leave her alone. Thankfully he knew what I needed and gave me that space. And, so I think finding your own resilience is really about knowing yourself and being honest with yourself and allowing yourself to take the space and the time and whatever resource you need to get back up. Because, what Donnie McClurkin said, we fall down, but we get up. You got to figure out what it is that's going to help you get back up and do it. I don't care what the outside world is telling you, what your job might be saying. If you have a failure at work, you got to figure out what do I need to get back up.
Yes. Wow, that is so powerful. Grief and grieving the loss and allowing yourself to be more acquainted with yourself. Because I think that we as women get to this space and place in our lives where we're always pouring out, where everyone else is getting pieces of ourselves. And at the end of the day, we're sort of left with these fragments of our soul. So that is a wonderful way for us to come home. I always tell women that your heart is a place that only you and God dwell. It's your sacred space. And that's what I'm hearing from the experience that you had in your life, that you got to a place where you knew yourself, you were comfortable in yourself to say, wait a minute, I just need to step away and step back for a moment and get alone with myself and get alone with God. So that is wonderful. So my final questions are about how did you, step out on faith to love again and to come into a relationship with who is now your beautiful husband and having all those other experiences. What was that like? What was that journey like for you?
It's funny in some ways because, like I said, I was like, I'm not getting married again. I might have a boo thing or whatever, but I don't have to tie that knot and all this kind of stuff. But I think the reality is I got a man who valued marriage, who was God-fearing, and who wanted to create this relationship, this family, this life as an example for our children. Because both of our, sets of children grew up with divorced, parents.
Wow.
And they'd never seen what a man and a woman living in a house together, loving each other, supporting each other, being there for each other. They'd never seen what that looked like. And, he explained these things to me because when he's like, I think we need to get married, I was like, well, why we need to do that, And he's like, but between him and honestly, our mothers were big in this too, because, everybody was talking to me. Everybody ministered to me on this. And they were like, you all love each other. You're good for each other. You're going to be great to each other.
Wow.
Why not be the example of marriage that you never had and that these kids have never seen? So, I'm happily married. Love that we got married. I can't imagine it any other way now. As I see our kids now, who they just know we come together. We're a package deal. Whatever you say to me, he's gonna know, and we're gonna both agree or disagree, and we're gonna walk out together as a unit. And I see that in my kids now, who are looking at relationships and are getting older and dating, and they understand now what they need to be thinking about when they think about marriage, when they think about relationships. And so having that, again, that legacy that we're trying to create, I tell my kids, I was like, I pray that you don't end up in a divorce situation, that you are allowed to stay with the person that you came with, for forever. And so they understand the value of that. And I just, look forward to, none of them are married yet. I look forward to those situations for them, their choices, and the value of it being stronger than just, I'm in law school now, so I need to get married. I mean, I don't think any of our kids would do that, because they understand that it's a risk, and to be making God-fearing, conscious choices when they look into relationships. So it was a journey, and it was all me having to really just sit into why this was important, and I'm so glad that I did.
How long have y'all been married?
7 years. And I was like,
wow. So you've been together a long time. In today's market, I think that it's not, to your point, it's not the divorce rate, it's the marriage rate.
Right.
Sometimes we rush in because we think we need something out there, and oftentimes it really calls for us to do some deep work on the inside of us. And when you don't know who you are, when you haven't sat with yourself to become whole in and of yourself, you think that you're missing something, you'll go out and search for something and someone and try to put them in a certain place that they don't fit. And to Tamika's story, I think a lot of us have done this. I know I have, where you're thinking, okay, well, it's time. I waited. This is a part of my trajectory. And when you do that, you come out with your own outcomes. I'm so thankful to God that He blessed you with a healthy man, a whole man, and you came to Him as a whole woman.
Right.
And what I've heard in previous conversations that we've had is that you're not looking for Him to make you happy.
Right.
And He's not looking for you to make Him happy. You do that for your own selves, but you come together for, when it comes, what I also heard you just say recently is that it was about purpose. It was about legacy. It was about family. And I wish more of us would think like that, because that's what marriage does. Marriage is a wonderful union that was a God idea.
Right.
Institution of marriage is not just an institution, it's a blueprint for life. And I'm so thankful that you've been through everything that you've been through and are now allowing yourself to experience the bliss that God had for you and has for you. And what a testimony this is to your children. I do know that one of your sons is in law school now, right?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your children.
Oh, wow. So, I have a law school student. He just finished his first year of law school. So I'm so proud of him. I think he's walking in the footsteps. I love it. I'm like, I didn't deter that. And my younger son is upcoming rising junior in college. So all those financial decisions to not chase money or, come home to roost a little bit. And then our girls, we have a, older daughter who's in her 30s. She's got, she's a police officer, and
wow,
she's, thriving and doing well. We have another one who is late 20s and living and working here in Atlanta. And then our youngest is 18. She just graduated from high school, and we just did her college orientation yesterday. So we have a busy family dynamic, and kids all over the place. As you know, my son in law school's in DC. My one that's in college is in Indiana. Our oldest daughter is in Memphis, about to move to Dallas. We have one in Atlanta and one who we're not sure where she's going to end up, but going to college here in Atlanta. It's like, it's so fun to see how they're all growing and thriving, and just I look forward to what's next.
I love it. And I have one final question for you. If you were to give your younger self advice, what would that be?
To take my time. I think some of the decisions that I've made, or I said mine, and not in God's plan. And I think I would have had less bumps and bruises if I had just slowed down and let God speak to me and move forward in that way. I mean, life's going to be there, work's going to be there, love is going to be there, but take my time and make sure that I was doing things in the right order that God intended.
Wow, I love it. I love it. Okay, so maybe that wasn't my last question because I thought of another one. Okay, you know how I do.
Yeah.
If resilience is a superpower, what does your superpower look like?
My superpower is what? I think it's success. It's just success. Failure is not an option. I'm going to succeed in everything I do, even if you don't see it. Success.
Success. I love it. I love it. Well, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Tamika Newson, for your time and just your heart and your willingness to be truthful and transparent. I pray God's blessing upon you and your family. And thanks for being a part of the Resilient Women series. I know it's going to impact so many lives.
Thank you so much. And however I can support, I'm here for it. Love what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. So everybody, this ends another wonderful broadcast of the Inspire Every Life Resilient Women series. We'll see you back here next time.